very fortunate to have Megan Ross from Friends of NFFTY, Seed and Spark, to moderate and host this session. And Megan will kick things off. Megan, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan and NFFTY, for having me. So for accessibility purposes, I'll just give a brief description. I have dark hair and bangs and gold rimmed glasses and some art behind me of hands. And I'll also do a quick land acknowledgement. We'd like to acknowledge the land we are all on is occupied territory, and I will drop a link in the chat to find out where what land you are coming from. So I am coming to you from the land originally belonging to Jamanos, Tonkawa, Coahuiltecan, and Comanche. So let me just share that link in the chat for all of y'all to look up as well. So I wish I had a panel like this when I was in school, because I was very clueless about all the career options there were in the entertainment industry. And I kind of did it backward. I was a business major and then went into the business of entertainment and learned filmmaking in some of the roles I had on the agency side. But yeah, so I've had this a kind of mixed background. I learned things I like, things I don't like. And I think a lot of our panelists can speak to that as well. But I worked in marketing for TV networks. I worked on the agency side, working on client work. I know the previous panel was talking about that, the client agency dynamic. And now I'm currently at Seed and Spark, which kind of combines all of my work experiences and some of the side hustles and indie filmmaking that I was doing throughout my career. But I am really excited to speak to the panelists we have today, because they also have very similar but also varied backgrounds, taking their filmmaking skills and applying it to jobs you might not know even existed for people with film backgrounds. So we'll kick it off with, I'll just do in the order that I see y'all in. So Sarah Berkovic, NFFTY 2012. Sarah is a graduate of the Stanford MFA in Documentary Film and Video program and an alumnus of Emerson College. She has produced and directed several award-winning short docs, which have played at film festivals across the US. After living in Silicon Valley, Sarah became fascinated with VR. She began to explore the storytelling potential of this new medium, developing a project through the Oculus Launchpad program. She is also an educator who has experienced teaching various levels from primary grades to university levels, and believes in increasing access to media production and fostering diverse voices entering the field. Sarah currently works as the film education manager for youth and online programs at Film Independence. So please welcome Sarah.
Hi, everybody.
And next up on my screen, we have Mia Janae Watkins, which is NFFTY 2016, 2017, 2018. Mia currently resides in San Diego and works as a communications specialist at PlayStation, where she has won 2 company awards and contributed on several PlayStation game titles, including Days Gone, Knack 2, Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, MLB The Show, Death Stranding, and The Last of Us Part 2. She's also written, directed, and produced several short films and music videos that have screened at 15 plus festivals and accumulated accolades, including Best Music Video at the DC Black Film Festival and Toronto Short Film Festival, and the Platinum Award at Minefield Film Festival, LA. She currently runs an online writer summit, which she created with friends and colleagues during the COVID-19 shutdown, and has led more than 20 virtual writer summits with industry professionals from the US, Canada, and Germany. So please welcome Mia.
Hi, thank you.
And next up, we have Caitlin Suggs, NFFTY 2015. Caitlin is a filmmaker, 3D artist, and digital media producer based in Raleigh, North Carolina. She discovered her passion for film while pursuing her degree in biology at UNC Chapel Hill. After graduating, Caitlin dedicated herself to filmmaking, screening her work at film festivals across the country, and working behind the scenes at the Full Frame Documentary Film Festival for 4 years. She currently works in marketing at a software company in Cary, North Carolina, producing videos and other media. Caitlin continues to develop her creative projects, especially her 3D animation debut, a short film set in ancient Egypt. Please welcome Caitlin.
Hi, so happy to be here.
And finally, we have Jocelyn R.C., NFFTY 2007-2011. Jocelyn R.C. is a multidisciplinary artist, filmmaker, and dog mom, which I also relate to. Hopefully we won't hear my dog screaming later. She is also coincidentally one of the 3 original co-founders of NFFTY. Formerly trained in film production and photography, her career has zigzagged through multiple cities industries and work lifestyles over the past decade, from Los Angeles's film industry to San Francisco's tech culture to New York City's advertising world. She eventually returned to a blend of things in Seattle. She has art directed content for brands like Gap, LG, and T-Mobile, as well as shown her work at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Warehouse Gallery, and most recently, the Northwest Film Forum. As wonky and unexpected as this journey is, one guiding constant for Jocelyn has been a relentless enjoyment of working in the visual space. Please welcome Jocelyn. Alrighty, so all of you have very accomplished bios, and we're going to dig into that exactly, like the things you did on the side, the things you were doing in your 9-to-5. So can you each, we'll go one by one, share what before you started your career, what was your background, your studies, or your training focused in pre first job? Whoever would like to start.
I can hop on. So my background, I actually got really interested in film really early. Like in high school, I was in film clubs. I loved watching films. And like for a senior high school project, I decided to make a documentary, which I'd never done before. I just like decided to do it. And it was not very good, but like the process of going out and talking to people and with a camera and like putting it all together, it really like hooked me and my curiosity, and like it was just a medium I fell in love with. So I ended up applying to like only 1 or 2 film schools. I wasn't sure if it was something I wanted to do, but I got into a film school. I got into Emerson College and decided I wanted to pursue that further. So I studied film at Emerson, and then like definitely honed in on documentary, and then decided to do an MFA program beyond that to like even more, because I thought I wanted to do teaching too. So that was like another piece that like came into it. I really liked education and I wanted to teach. So I wanted a master's for that reason.
Awesome. Anyone else want to share your background, Mia?
Yeah, I can go next. So similar background to Sarah in the sense that in high school, I was involved in film, but I really didn't I didn't know that that's what I wanted to do. So at that time, like I taught myself how to like video edit when I was like probably like in my like early mid-teens. And then I was using that experience to apply it to my school's like video newsletter. So we would make videos. I would go around with our little flip cameras and just interview folks. And then I went to Elon University for journalism. And then I think the first week we have like this like activities fair, and it's super cool. And I hadn't declared a major yet, but I was in a school of communications. And then I saw the film club and I was like, oh, wow, this looks super fun. And I think this is kind of like what I want to do. And then as soon as I went into the club, I was hooked, and I just immediately changed my major to cinema. And then I learned a lot of how to like write a film, how to direct one and produce one. And so it was really, really awesome. And then I graduated with a Bachelor's of Arts with Cinema and Television Arts with a minor in Multimedia Studies.
Very cool. Caitlin?
Yeah, I think like everyone else, I've always had an interest in film. What I would tell myself as a kid is that I would make a ton of money in science and then I'd retire and then I would direct, because I never really saw it as a viable career. It always felt like one of those pipe dreams, like being a rock star or an astronaut. So I went to school for biology, and while I was in college, I guess I got the filmmaking bug, and I started experimenting with films, and I'd spend my summers making short films, and I didn't actually start to see it as a career option until like my junior year. And I tried applying to a bunch of internships, didn't get any, but from there I was hooked. So after I graduated, I decided to dive into film, and then I found my way to 3D animation, and I love that too. So kind of get to merge some of the tech and scientific side with the creative and art side.
Nice. And Jocelyn?
Yeah, so I think I got really interested in film probably in around junior high. That's also when like we switched from VHS to DVDs, and all those behind the scenes featurettes started showing up, and you can kind of just eat those up. And I was eating those up as like a little preteen, and started taking my school that I went to offered a video production class, like in iMovie with little mini DV cameras. So that's kind of where I started learning about the actual act of like video production. And then the more I learned, the more I loved it. The more complicated it got, the more I loved it. I love every part of the process. And so from middle school all the way through high school, it went from video production into kind of like darkroom photography. So always with a camera, basically. Since DVDs came out, there was always a camera in my hands, essentially. And then one thing led to another, and then I ended up going to film school, which I don't know, maybe I should have gotten a science degree too, because I realized like after film school that a lot of the stuff that was I was doing in film school could have been done like in real world settings, but that's different conversation before I get too far into that tangent, guys. But
yeah, we'll probably get into that anyway. But so what would you say your first job you held that actually applied your filmmaking and creative skills, whether it was directly or loosely? Was it something you saw yourself doing when you first started out, or was it like completely unexpected new territory? So first kind of relevant job that used those skills that you had, the filmmaking skills.
My first one was like a summer camp, like an art summer camp counselor. And that was like definitely my first teaching experience too, which was like slightly overwhelming. But for me, it's always been sort of like the education piece has been in there as well.
Mm-hmm. Mia.
Sorry.
No worries.
I would say
make it easier.
Most of like most of the first gigs I sort of had were all kind of related to film in some way, whether it was like I think I did like a mini doc for a summer camp that my mom was working at, and we were just doing like I was filming it, editing it, and doing all the interviews. And then in college, most of the jobs I had were either I was an edit lab assistant, or I was like, I think at one point I was making videos for just like one professor, just for his program that he had going on. So majority, and then also in the mix of that, I was also an RA. So that was fun, and definitely not film related. So that was a nice break from everything. And I learned a lot of leadership skills and like mediation skills from that. So that was kind of a mixed bag of all that fun jazz.
Yeah. Now I'm seeing the connection between RA and like a producer on set, like all of that, or even like a first AD. It's like you have to wrangle. Usually a lot of young people. Caitlin, how about you?
Well, it's kind of a loose application of my creative skills, but my first industry-related job was at the Full Frame Documentary Film Festival. I lived close to Durham, so it was pretty convenient to me. I was a transportation coordinator, so I managed a team of volunteers who greeted and transported the filmmakers to and from the airport, around the festival site. So it's really interesting to, as a filmmaker who has been to a film festival, to also see it from the other side. You kind of learn about what festivals are looking for, and it's just, I mean, there's so much work that goes on behind the scenes. You gain a whole new appreciation for everyone who's running them. I can't say I necessarily saw myself doing that, but I know where I want to be in 10, 20 years, and I'm just kind of taking the opportunities as they come. So if I see something that matches my skills that's related to film, then I jump on it.
Nice. How about you, Jocelyn?
Yeah, the first job I had in the film industry was just like PAing in a studio. But the first job that I actually had where I could apply some of the skills of video production was for a tech startup in the Silicon Valley. They work in virtual reality. And it was the actual making videos was not new to me, but having to make videos on a subject that I had knew nothing about. Like I remember the first day I showed up and my boss was like, yeah, we're going to talk to some developers. And I was like, I don't even know what a developer is. I'm like 21 years old. I'm like, what's a developer? But that, I think my 2 years there, it was a crash course in understanding how to start applying this skill set to pretty much anything. And being just realizing that this skill, as long as I'm an open sponge and willing to learn and converse with different people, this can be applied pretty much anywhere. And that's kind of what I learned on the first job, but it was definitely putting me as a fish out of water in the Silicon Valley with my camera.
Yeah, that's also good advice that you, like when you walk into a job, you're usually learning on the job. You're not expected to know all the things right away, especially early on in your career. So that's one thing to keep in mind for filmmakers when they're looking for jobs and they're like, I genuinely don't even know what this title does. It's like, you got to do a little research, but it's like, then you realize, oh, I can apply and adapt some of these other skills into this space, especially because like in media, like new jobs and titles are created every single day.
Yep.
So what new skills, going off that topic, have you acquired throughout your career that led you to the role that you're in today? We can kick off with Sarah again.
Yeah. Well, based on what Jocelyn just said, I also like did a deep dive into virtual reality in Silicon Valley for a couple of years. It was something that I just became interested in. Like I was going to filmmaker meetups and I saw like an early demo of some VR coming out and like blew my mind and was like, I need to learn this technology because I'm seeing it before a lot of people can see it. So I was like obsessed and just like learning it as a hobby. And then I started like a side project with a startup and like was learning all this new technology, which was like really intimidating to me. Also, I like don't consider myself like a technical person, but I just like surrounded myself with people that would teach me and it was very interesting. And I eventually like developed a project that got into it was like this incubator through Oculus. And so they ended up funding my project, but it was a competition to win funding. So I had to like build a team and like build out a demo and like get it to a certain point. And then it was kind of like a grant application process too. So like that whole thing was a really major learning experience. And it was like totally self-taught. It was like after school, like I'd learned nothing about new media and technology through school, aside from like learning cameras and things like that. So that was a piece that like I kind of picked up after school. And I ended up teaching my first university class. Like I said, I wanted to be a teacher at some point. My first university position was a VR course teaching position.
Cool.
So that like kind of brought it all together.
That's another interesting point. Like a lot of the stuff that you're doing in your jobs now were not classes when I think we're all millennials here. Like those classes did not exist. I had to like create a directed study to do like social media marketing because they did not even cover that in our business classes at that point. So that's really cool that you were like, you saw a trend, you saw like how that was like going to be the next thing. And then you just like got the resources yourself after school and built up that experience. That's awesome.
I was not paid for it though. For like that was not my main job ever.
Yeah.
Until I got to
still, yeah. I think a lot of the skills that we acquire as we're building our careers it's a lot of I'm in comedy, so it's like a lot of unpaid work is happening behind the scenes. Mia, how about you? What new skills have you acquired throughout your career that led you to the role you're in today?
I think it's pretty funny that you mentioned being a resident assistant and some connection to producing, because I feel like that there is a connection there. When you're working with people, like knowing like how to, one, I'll just say from an RA perspective, keeping everyone safe. I mean, I think that's something really important to consider on set as well. Getting everyone together. And then, of course, like conflict mediation and resolution. On like when I did short films in like college and then like after college, like, you know, just like making sure you're creating the energy on the set is very welcoming for everyone and that everyone is able to pitch ideas. Everyone understands like what their roles are. And then when I was an editing lab assistant, going on the post-production side, learning how to help other people with their projects and myself having to learn like the terminology. We had to learn, I think at the time, like Adobe, and then we were learning a bit of Final Cut. And then we moved to Avid. So teaching, like being in the same boat with everyone as like learning the same thing as them, but also learning how to like help others and how to explain things in a certain way, like makes sense to other people. Like for instance, there are things like certain terminology that I might know that if I'm working with someone that wants to do a creative project, they might not know about. So explaining that like, hey, if we go this route, this is what this will look like. This is what the style you're looking for. This is what this means for that. So I kind of say like all those jobs kind of helped me towards that. And then a lot of it was definitely just learning how to be a leader and all those roles, learning how to set boundaries as well. There are times, I think, in our editing lab sessions where I was helping folks to the point where I felt like, okay, I think I'm doing the project, but like we can work together to like get you to a happy medium.
Yeah.
Because I want you to be successful as well, and have your own voice in this.
Yeah.
But a lot of that has kind of helped with the stuff I do in communications when it comes to mediation, and you're working with whole different types of departments. And then most of those, maybe there are departments that aren't familiar with the jargon you're using when it comes to editing or filmmaking or producing a creative visual project. So all that's kind of culminated into what I do today. And it's pretty fun. And it's also cool, like helping people learn new things and then show them new possibilities. Like say they have one concept in mind, and then with the knowledge I have and the ideas they have, we can come together and create something really awesome.
That's also good to note that like, in all of your careers, these are really collaborative roles. Like Sarah mentioned, she had to build a team for that Oculus Lab project. It's like, so you need those people skills. You have to manage expectations, like you said, defining the role and like knowing what work gets passed off to the next team member. These are all really, man, I wish I heard this when I was in my early 20s, like, and go backwards and then restart my career. Caitlin, what new skills have you acquired throughout your career that led you to your current role?
I've been really honing my organization and project management, starting with full frame. There were so many moving parts with transportation of like flights getting delayed and so many people flying in at once. And it was always, I thought of it as organized chaos. So that kind of lent itself to my current role, where I've recently taken on events management, conferences, trade shows. So lots more moving parts. But you really have to have an awareness of everything that's happening and then being able to delegate like what you need from each different team member. And so if you're kind of a neat freak or a spreadsheet freak, like that can definitely be helpful for what I'm doing. And it kind of lends itself to the film industry because, if you're directing, you need to be able to keep track of everything that's happening. And then also just, at full frame, like I worked with so many different kinds of people, the different volunteers. So you get a sense for communicating with people from all different walks of life, all different experience levels. So that's been really valuable.
Yeah, events and festival production is so similar to film production. It's like you got to have some of those type A people that are like pulling all of the changing details into one document. Otherwise, it's like you said, you need the organized part for the chaos to be pulled in. How about you, Jocelyn? What are new skills that you've acquired that led you to your current role?
I think everyone actually kind of spoke to them a bit. It really is just developing communication leadership skills kind of in practice on the job. And I think it's really hard to do that. You can't really do that in the textbook or seminar setting, right? That is just like in practice day to day. I think what Caitlin was talking about, delegation, like being able to delegate to a team and then trust those people in what they're, specializing in and doing. Also, compromising because you're always against like a deadline, right? So when you're collaborating and there's time constraints and there just all these different moving parts. So finding a common place to everyone did their job and is happy with their job is kind of what I've learned is like the delicate dance that we're all trying to do all the time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So what would you say your current or recent role entails? We'll go through each one of you, because I think a lot of young filmmakers would not be familiar with your titles or know exactly what how the filmmaking skills apply to your industry. So give a simple breakdown of like what you do today and how you're applying those film skills. We'll go back to Sarah.
Sure. So today I'm an education manager at Film Independent, which I haven't really mentioned Film Independent yet, but I'm going to be like repping at the career fair. So if you want to learn a lot more, it's a great nonprofit organization that supports emerging independent filmmakers. I wish I knew about it like when I was in college because it's like a wealth of information and community and just go check out the Facebook page and the YouTube page. There's like interviews and screenings, like stuff's happening all the time, which is awesome. That's partly why I love this job, because I'm like learning all the time and I'm like exposed to what's going on in the film industry in LA and globally. So that's great. My current role, I'm wearing many hats. It's a small organization. So I'm doing like youth programs and working with mentorships in local high schools. I'm also helping manage online programs. And like since COVID started, everything's an online program.
Yeah.
So that's sort of taken over most of my job recently, is like figuring out how to put on things like this, like the virtual summit. So that's what I'm up to today.
Nice. Mia, how about you?
So I am a communications specialist at PlayStation, and I mainly go around. The pitch I give to people when I say, what do I do at my job, is that I just consider myself a professional hype woman. So kind of going around and supporting as many internal teams as we can. As far as how like my film skills have gone to that, I started at PlayStation as a video editor, and so through that, I was able to work with so many different teams. And then I also I mentioned a newsletter in high school, kind of brought that back for our internal team, and that kind of helped me get to where I am today. So I still sort of keep that knowledge of what it takes to put a project, especially a video project, together. And then with that knowledge of producing a creative project, last year I went ahead and got my professional project management professional certificate, so the PMP. And that really helped me put so much of my thought when it comes to putting a project together in an organized chaos kind of way. So like I'm definitely that person. I have like notes everywhere. Like there's so many creative ideas I wanted to execute. And so having that PMP really helped not only with my professional life, but also how I go about my personal projects and how we go about organizing them, what needs to get done, who do we need for these projects, who do we need to get approvals from, how long will it take, what the timelines for that. And I cannot tell you how much that has helped me immensely, and how like I know that's going to help me a lot more in the future.
Nice. And what an amazingly beneficial thing to come into the company from one role and then work with those editors and be able to know like what it's like to be in that position and how do you communicate and get projects done. Like I felt like when I was a producer at an ad agency, because I had that experience as a copywriter and working on the creative side, I knew how to like communicate with them and understand their needs, versus like the account people were more like understood the client more. And like I was always like fighting for the creative team. So it's super helpful to have that insight. Caitlin, how about you? What's your current role and how are you applying your film skills?
So I'm currently a digital media producer at a B2B software company. We're in the supply chain planning space. Super exciting, I know, but relevant right now.
Everyone's talking about supply chain now. I just read or listened to the Daily and they're like, it's collapsing. And I'm like, oh God.
Yeah. So at the company, I kind of own all things visual. So social media imagery, PDF layout and design. So like our case studies, white papers, slide decks. So earlier this year, we actually redid our branding and redid our website. So that was a big space where I could contribute, and that was really exciting. So I used my 3D skills to develop 3D imagery around everything, which lended itself well to supply chain because, if you have an isometric image of like the whole supply chain, it's like a little mini supply chain image. It communicates it well. So I was able to get everybody on board for that. We were recently acquired over the summer, so my role has shifted a bit. So right now, like I said, I've taken over events and trade shows and all the moving parts that are there. But I am, since the trade show season's kind of winding down, I am working to get more video for us because I think it's a space that a lot of companies are just not focusing enough. And it's just such a valuable return, especially with short attention spans these days.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a good point to make. You mentioned all the different assets you make on behalf of the company. And so for people who come in who are interested in the agency side, like there's like kind of, it just depends on the budgets, but there's kind of like an endless need for content. And most companies don't know how to do video. Like I've had clients where it's like, they'll give you feedback that is like not something we could like create a line out of nowhere, or like edit something to like force a line on someone. It's like, that's kind of illegal. But for like a private equity firm, but yeah, it's like, you have to be the ones showing them the way, and the experts in that field. So just like having that video background in a field like yours, and agency work is like kind of it doesn't seem like that's going to go out of trend anytime soon. Jocelyn, how about you? How do you describe your current role and how you're applying the film?
Yeah, my current role is unemployed and undecided. I'm actually in a limbo state right now. My most recent role, I left about a year ago in the middle of the pandemic, but I was a senior creative lead in the T-Mobile content studio, and we basically, my team, I supervised 2 art directors, and my team would we would receive briefs from a strategy team internally it was basically an internal agency, but we still outsourced a lot to external agencies. So my role was taking briefs that we would get, usually for digital, social specific campaigns, for just talking about our wireless benefits and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of times we would take that, and the concepts that our team would develop would then be presented and either just be produced as the straightforward concept it was, or if the larger advertising team internally liked them, sometimes those ideas would snowball into becoming like a bigger part of a 360 campaign for the brand. So it really just depended. But I knew that our team was tasked there to specifically help manage internal and external development of social and digital content for the web and for social channels. But currently, what I do on a day-to-day basis is like propagate plants and
very important work.
Yes,
because I've also invested a lot more time over the last year and a half in that as well. But you brought up a good point in that clients or brands can often have those in-house agencies, and then like depending on how they split their budget up, it could be, one agency has digital, one has out of home, one has like commercial work. So there are like a lot of opportunities on both the client and agency side for people with filmmaking backgrounds. Let's see, just a time check. Let's talk about like balancing your full-time role with any creative pursuits or projects. We're all filmmakers here. Are you currently doing that? And if you are, how do you manage your time to accommodate both? So we'll kick off with Sarah.
That's a great question. The last personal project I did was the VR piece, which took like 3 years to finish. It was like so intense that I was like not in a rush to do another one of those immediately. Yeah. So I really do think that like when I teach, I'm able to explore and produce and like play around a little bit. And so that's like pretty fulfilling creatively for me. That's kind of how I keep the practice alive right now, the practice side of my brain. The rest of it is very like, I have like a 9-to-5 at a nonprofit. And so that's what I'm doing. But I still try and teach like adjunct, maybe like a course a year or something like that. Yeah, that's how I'm staying active.
Constant learner, or whatever they say, like you're always lifelong student, even as an educator.
I also have a little baby now, so that's like my major project.
That's a pretty impressive project.
Yes.
That takes up a lot of time. Mia, how about you?
So my activity in my personal projects has sort of been on a decline. I think when I first graduated and got into my job, I was definitely like using my weekends to create personal projects and videos with friends and colleagues. And people were like, "How do you sleep?" And I was like, "I don't." The last personal project I did was, I think back in 2017, we did a music video. I believe that was screened at a NFFTY. And it was really awesome. Great message. It was all about fatherhood in the Black community. And we were just like, the song the artist made was amazing. So now I think after that, I realized I wanted to focus more on my writing project. So I kind of took a break from doing more film and try to really hunker down on long form novel writing, and then also getting back into screenwriting. And then this year and last year, with the pandemic, the Writers Summit that I run has been super helpful in making me sit in one spot and get some work done, and have other people sort of keep me accountable. Like, hey, are you writing today? So that has been pretty awesome. So I do feel like I do have, now that we're at home, like the weekends and then after work, I have more time and energy to work on those writing projects, and then hopefully get back to getting back on set and bringing those projects to life in the future.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. I was putting off my writing for a long time, and then the pandemic hit and productions halted and like stage shows stopped, and I was like, oh, I should probably revisit the thing that I wanted as a career. Because yeah, it's as you're waiting to safely return to set, it's nice to be able to spend that time on writing. Caitlin, how about you?
I guess I'm in a little bit of an opposite boat with COVID. You know, the supply chain is in the news a lot. So the 9 to 5 really picked up. I'm lucky enough to have some flexibility to my schedule. So I do have time I can devote to my film, my 3D animation film that I'm working on. But it's hard to escape the office when it's in your dining room. So I feel like I'm always on for the 9 to 5, and it's a little hard at the end of the week to transition to my creative work and have that energy. So I'm hoping once things go back to some kind of normal and I can go into the office, there'll be more of a separation, and I can devote that time more, because it's so important to work on your creative pursuits as well. And I wish employers really understood this, because it feeds the work that you do in your 9 to 5. So the more you're able to have that creative outlet, the more productive and happy you're going to be in that job.
Definitely. Yeah, I definitely feel that too. It's like you used to be able to leave your work at work physically by like having that commute, but when you're constantly, you like do all your work on the computer, even your side projects, it's very tempting to be like, oh, let me check this work email, and then all of a sudden you're competing with the free time that you have. So yeah, having that separation for your creative pursuits is really important. How about you, Jocelyn?
Candidly, this has been like a chronic struggle for me, is trying to find ways to carve out time for creative pursuits outside of like what the employer is asking you to do. And that's probably a huge reason why my resume looks like a Cheesecake Factory menu. You're just like, when does it end? Because I basically will work somewhere full time and realize that it's sucking my soul dry because I haven't had time to I haven't had the energy to carve out time for my creative endeavors. So then I'll leave that job because I'm like, I need to find something with better balance, or I'll just take time off to start freelancing again. And in my head, I'm like, I can do it. I can freelance, and then I'll have the time to, but then I realize when I'm not working in freelance, I'm just trying to find the next freelance job.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, okay, full-time it is, and I'll do weekends. And then again, it's still, if you figure out how to balance your life so that you can actually have that time and a full-time job and like be super sane the whole time, let me know.
Yeah, I know. I felt silly for putting that question in, because I'm like, I've never been able to answer this question, like finding that good balance. Like I do it, but I haven't figured out like the exact ratio.
The key to it. Yeah. It's like you're constant, you're just an ever evolving way of figuring it out and just trying to make it work. But if anything, I think it's helpful. It would have been helpful for me in my late teens or early 20s to hear someone say that I'm still trying to figure that out, guys. Like, it's you'll figure it out. And as your career evolves, your understanding of what you want out of your career, and also how far you're willing to go, and just your priorities and values in life will continue evolving. So how you shape your time and your day will evolve. And I think letting that happen naturally is also part of the journey.
And being honest with yourself about what you like and don't like. It's like, what are the things that you're willing to compromise in what is, usually a day job or like a career path, to that, like, because it's nothing's ever going to be perfect. I don't like dream jobs. I'm not sure exist, because I think the dream job I want will probably like make me really tired and angry also, like realistically. But like, I think, it's you're constantly figuring out, tweaking at things and making sure you take care of yourself outside of work. But so I think as these emerging filmmakers are thinking about this, we'll go into one last question before we open it up. Like, that's a huge thing. Like, don't beat yourself up over not like loving everything about your job or thinking like this is the end all be all. Cause you know, you can move on. Like, that job can stay in its place and they'll find someone else. Not to say like you're replaceable, but it's just like you don't need them as much as you think you do. I think is the advice for navigating capitalism I want to bestow upon people. So finally, what advice would you give young filmmakers who are trying to figure out what type of work they should pursue as they start their careers in creative fields? And I'll combine this with another question. So advice, as well as like any resources, podcasts, books, job listing sites, whatever helped you that you'd recommend as they figure out what the hell to do next. I'll kick off with Sarah.
Yeah, I was like thinking about this question. It's a really good one. Maybe like following your curiosity and continuing learning informally was like something I didn't know how to do earlier. And I think that like there's things that you learn in school in a setting like that where it's like kind of given to you and you like process it and you do the assignments, but it's like much harder to pick up stuff like informally. And I think there's just like tons out there to do that, but it's easier if you're really interested in it. So like if you surround yourself with other people interested in it, or you just watch a lot of movies, if movies are your thing, watch a lot of movies and figure out like what's interesting to you about it. Like give yourself little assignments and homework to keep learning, or find other communities like interested in the same thing. That's really like served me well in my career. And I found it something like I value in my job. Like I want a job that's not exactly the same every day, and I can kind of like continue learning and being exposed to new things.
Yeah. And that's a good point you said about actually being interested. Like when you came across VR, you weren't like, you know, oh, I need to learn this thing because it will like make my career better or whatever. Like you were like, this is cool. I want to learn about it. So that's a key. Don't just like force yourself to learn things because like some, you know, headhunter was like, you should learn this weird program.
Well, sometimes you have to, and like the technical stuff can be intimidating, but like think of it like a tool you're picking up, and so it's easier kind of to do it that way. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I wanted the end goal of learning to produce VR involved a lot of steps that were like scary.
Yeah, but you had that interest to start, and that was key. Mia, how about you? Any advice?
So I'll tackle this from what to do when I'll first start with at your job. And then another one is like, just if you're just doing your own thing and outside your work time. So if you are working, say you're working at a job and maybe there is a department where there are so many talented cinematographers or like video engineers, I'd say like learn from them as much as possible. That's what really helped me. I'm learning from other editors that have been in the game for a very long time. Just make those connections and really like be a sponge. Like I'm still a sponge. I've been at PlayStation for 5 years. I'm learning something new every day from people in those departments, but also open yourself to learn things from different disciplines, because you never know how that's also going to apply to your creative work, kind of like all the project manager stuff I mentioned earlier. And then on a personal like stuff you're doing outside of work, definitely continue being that sponge. I read so many books, and it's a mixture of leadership books, is a mixture of like filmmaking books or advice books or writing books. I had a friend just send me a really cool podcast today all about about writing, watching as many like panels, attending as many panels, finding a community, whether that's with your alumni friends, people you meet at work, people you meet in different groups in your city. So just building that network, and it could be maybe your network isn't all film folks, but maybe you have some folks in marketing. You may have some folks that know a lot more social media. Like really diversify the people you're around, because you never know how much you're going to learn. I think that's the biggest thing I would express. And you know, if I like that, Megan, you brought up like don't beat yourself up. And also I would also say like don't beat yourself up if you are hard at work at your job, but then you haven't had that time to create all those personal projects. Still keep doing it in mind, just making space. I think it's just like, I feel like now as I'm getting older is all about time management, and it's so
Yeah.
important. And I wish I learned more about that in college as well.
Yeah.
And I think once you find your own rhythm and your own cadence, you be okay, like, I think I can find a way to make this work. And if there is a period where you're not doing much, like, you know, the Michaela Cole, who recently won for her series I May Destroy You, one of the best things, her whole speech was amazing, but one thing I really loved was, you know, like, you don't be afraid to disappear for a while and see what comes to you. So just really appreciating all the time you have, whether you're active or you're not active, it's all going to work out. You know, you may not see how all the dots align in this very moment, but once you step back somewhere down the line, or maybe like a month from now, like, oh, okay, I see why that had to happen. Or that makes sense on why I learned this, or because I learned this, now I'm able to do this part. So that would be my 2 cents and a quarter to give the folks.
That's really, really great advice. I know this advice is meant for youth filmmakers, but I'm going to take that with me, because I always think of like the stuff I have going on in my life as like this pie, and there's so many slices. You have your like personal projects, your you know, way you make bills, your relationships, your friends, your like alone time, and you can't always divide them up equally. So like you said, there's going to be times, like Caitlin said, like supply chain is like, it was a crazy last year for her, so it's like that might be a bigger slice of the pie, and then like the film project may need to just like be a smaller pie for a little bit until work chills out. And that's just going to be the reality for these creative filmmakers that like enter into the workforce and are figuring out that balance. It's not always going to be so evenly distributed, and that's okay. But also take time for yourself, because that slice should always like be there. Like if you only have like a crumb for self-care and alone time, that's not good.
You
don't
need
want
the biggest slice of pie for self-care, please, folks. Like,
the
learn this
time. Definitely.
Learn this now.
Log off. Mia,
you're talking literal pie too, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, I am imagining. I'm thinking of a pie spot in Brooklyn I used to love. It's like, that's my self-care. Caitlin, how about you? Advice?
Yeah, I wanted to approach the advice that I would give as, what would I tell myself when I'm like 22 trying to start out? Because I remember, I mean, even now, like there's always some element of feeling lost, at least for me, you know, until I'm where I want to be. I don't know the exact path to get there. And filmmaking is so unique because, you know, it's not like you go to med school and then you get your residency and then you're a doctor. You know, there's so many different ways in. So I would try to join in on these kind of panels when I could. And I felt like a lot of the advice wasn't as actionable as I would like. So I try to think like, what would I want to tell myself, and what do I also need to take to heart now? I would say, first of all, definitely keep making films. Like, you know, if you have free time on your weekend, like it doesn't matter how silly or stupid or small the idea, just make films. It's a great outlet. You exercise your skills, and you never know when you're going to have that great idea that is something you might want to submit to a film festival. As far as more career related advice, not everyone can make the move out to LA or New York right away when they're starting their career. Maybe it's not an option, or they want to do it later on when they're more established. So don't be afraid to look into these different roles that are maybe more corporate, looking into the marketing type of roles, because they need us. They don't always realize that they need us, but there's so much room for in-house creativity and creatives who can teach them what is needed with regard to visuals and video and that sort of thing. And then the third piece I would say is seek out opportunities. This is something I need to remember myself all the time, but sometimes the best opportunities are the ones that you make for yourself. It's not that job posting that you see and apply to. It's maybe the job that you reached out to someone about, or maybe you wanted to set up a coffee to get some advice from someone, and then they can refer you to a job. So put yourself out there. I know it's hard, and I know I need to work on that too, but don't be afraid to seek out opportunities.
Yeah, I love that piece. And Mia, you mentioned this too about like learning from other people. Like I'm in my early 30s and I'm still seeking mentorship from other people who have had experience that I haven't had in a career that I want. So that's like a never ending thing of like learning from people who are doing the job that you want to be doing, or know a little bit more about like a thing you're interested in. That's really great advice. Jocelyn, how about you?
All of the stuff that everyone has just said is amazing. And like, for me, it's just been really helpful just to hear all this too right now. I think what I would say, or to tell myself as a person fresh out of film school, is that I think perspective. I think it's so easy to want, especially with social media and just seeing what everyone else is up to this day and age. It's so easy to want the end product right away and forget the 1,000 steps that it might take to get to a certain point, and just kind of saying the perspective and staying focused on what is priority today, this week, what's immediately in front of you. Because I think at no point in my career do I, like, even right now, but at every point in my career, I've always asked myself, like, is this right? Like, is this, like, what am I doing? But then as I keep going, every time I look back, like, it's easy to see, oh, this is why I'm here, and this is right, because everything led to here. But in the moment, and especially in the act of when you're transitioning between like certain roles, or like moving from a chapter to the next chapter, that moment of transition, I think it's unsettling, it's exciting, it's all these things that, because that's when you're kind of growing, right? You're jumping, and that flailing about in midair time. I think don't be scared of that. Don't be scared of that, because when you land, you're gonna land. So when you land, you'll be able to, like, so just don't be scared of the flailing about times. Is my advice.
There will be a lot of flailing. I love that. Well, that's a great way to end our panel. I want to thank our wonderful panelists, Mia, Jocelyn, Sarah, and Caitlin, for sharing their experiences and advice with us today. I feel selfish. I'm taking all of your advice with me into my own career.